The Last Line is a completely free podcast, but takes a lot of time, effort, and hard work to make happen. So if you'd like to support the show, then please head over to patreon.com/The Last Line. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time you're listening to this podcast. My name is James Albarn, and you are listening to episode 11 of The Last Line. Yes, that's right, we're back. It's been a while since we last spoke. I promised that we'd be back around February, March. That didn't happen. Life gets in the way. And I've been busy recording a whole heap of episodes for you to enjoy, and hopefully we'll just be able to keep it going and going and going and going and going. So how are we all? Have we been enjoying Love Island so far? Yeah, Love Island this year, I have made the decision that I'm not even going to bother pretending that I'm not watching Love Island. Last year I was very much, I won't be watching Love Island. No, that's been, and then secretly watching it. So this year I've decided I'm just going to tell everyone that I'm watching Love Island, because I think everyone else is watching it anyway. I'd just like to tell you first, before we get into it, that all of the podcast episodes that have been released so far and any future episodes will also be released over on youtube.com/Last Line Films. We don't film these podcasts, but some people like to consume their content through YouTube, and I'm happy to deliver on that front. If you like the podcast, then please do subscribe, leave us a comment, leave us a rating, share it with all of your friends. It is much appreciated. You can also head over to lastlinefilms.com, check out some information about the podcast there. Also, some of the films that I've made over the years. I've even made one recently with a friend of the podcast, Tom Williams. We made a little documentary about his gig at London Scala. Please do check it out and give him some love over at his YouTube channel. You can follow us on Twitter at James Albarn. You can follow me on Instagram at James Albarn. You can also follow the podcast on Instagram at The Last Line Podcast. You can also go to facebook.com/The Last Line and leave a like there for information about the podcast and all manner of goodies. So, who did we talk to for this week's edition of the podcast? Well, you will already know if you've downloaded it because it says it in the title, but it's comedian, actor, and musician Nick Helm. During my conversation with Nick earlier this year, we talked about the evolution of his stand-up persona. We have a rather extensive and scientific chat about Bellybutton fluff, and I get a lot of advice as a budding stand-up comedian, which hopefully will also be helpful to any other stand-up comedians out there, or anyone who's just interested in stand-up comedy. And so we start at the beginning, with Nick describing to me his early days as a stand-up comic.
I did my first gig in September 2006, and then I did my second gig in sort of like February 2007.
Yeah.
And so, and back then there were less gigs, and
right.
So it would take you that long to get another gig. And then eventually, when I was up to full speed, I could only really gig like once or twice a fortnight.
Okay.
So by the time you'd learnt something, you were still nervous again by the time you got back to the next gig. So it was difficult to sort of like start. But I don't know, there's lots of gigs now, aren't there? But there's also lots of comedians.
Yes. So it's there are lots of gigs, but
there's not enough audience.
There's lots of gigs, not enough audience. So generally, you have to bring people.
More comedians than audience members.
Yeah. And generally, even though there are more gigs, a lot of them will be like booked up for like 3 months in advance because there's so many people trying to do it.
But I don't think it's that different. I just think there was less.
Right.
I think that there were less gigs. And then there were less comedians, and then it's sort of like a big there was a big comedy boom in the early 2000s,
Yeah.
and that took a while to sort of. And now it's like a legitimate career where they do like university courses. And you go, we never had any of that. When I was at university, we had comedians that came to visit, you know, and then John Oliver came to our university, and you go, oh right, yeah. So comedy, but it was still sort of like an unobtainable thing that you could do. And now it's kind of like. I think as well because of Twitter, and it's possible to sort of be funny without getting on stage. Do you know what I mean? It's actually comedy is a lot more not accessible. I don't mean from an audience point of view, but I mean from if you're someone that wants to be funny.
Yeah. Then
I think that it's easier to do that now. Although it sort of balances out, I suppose, because there's less audience and less. There's a tipping point where. Suddenly, at some point in the country, there's going to be more comedians than human beings, and so it's just like, oh right, okay. But then, even like, when you go right back to like the 90s, and I say right back to the 90s, there was like 5 comedians, and so now Edinburgh was like 3 rooms above pubs in Edinburgh, and now it's kind of like this huge industry, so it's kind of just changing all the time.
I think the thing I'm struggling with is, what's the phrase? Learning to run before you can walk, or is that the phrase?
That is a phrase. Is that the phrase that you want to use?
Who knows?
But learning to walk before you can run.
Learning to walk before you can run, because I get frustrated about only doing 5 minutes, which I'm sure every comedian goes through that.
Do you know what though? Yeah, okay. I think there is that, and I think that there's it's like an apprenticeship where you have to sort of learn how to. But I am shit at doing 5 minutes, and I was always really, more comfortable doing an hour.
Because this is what I was going to say. Because I, from having like watched your stuff, being a fan of yours, I always think. I sort of thought that you're more of an hour person, and I couldn't imagine you doing.
I don't know what to do with 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
I think 5 minutes is like almost. I did a good 7 minutes on. There was a Frankie Boyle show a while ago.
Yeah.
In 2012, it was ages ago, and I remember I sort of like really worked out what a short set would be.
I think I might have watched it last night.
It was on the Boyle Variety.
Yeah, I watched it last night.
So then I did. I think what it consists of like 5 jokes and then a short poem and then a song and then that's it.
Yeah.
And you feel like you've got the sort of like the whole experience of my act in a short amount of time.
Right.
But it's still really tight, and but there's a little narrative in there where I come on and I get upset and then I leave, and it's all sort of like thing. But really, I'm more comfortable doing an hour. I've never known what to do with 5 minutes.
Because I found one where you're doing like the fast fringe or whatever. It's obviously like promoting.
Oh yeah,
like
I just did one thing. I think
you just came out and did your like letter from the bully.
Yeah, that's the first time I ever did that poem as well, and that went. That was nice. But I mean, it's just weird. I don't really know what to do with that amount of time, and. Even when I was doing 20, which basically I did 20 for Russell Howard, and then they cut that down to 14. And even when there's something like that, it's kind of there was a lot of thought put into doing, like having a beginning, a middle, and an end within a short. Because you kind of wanted to be like I did. I wanted to be self-contained, so that if you were on at the beginning or on in the middle, you'd get to a point where they'd go, well, fucking hell. You have to put him on last because no one can follow that.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, not that. Do you know what I mean? Because it was just a self-contained thing where you just go, yeah. But then also it would work in the middle, and it would, and I guess that was it. But then always with an hour, you just kind of like get to sort of explore lots more, and also you get to do themes, and I find that fun.
Because. It's been interesting going to open mics. Obviously, you see a lot of people starting out, and you see some people try and fit several bits into 5 minutes. I mean, obviously, it depends on their style and stuff, but they'll try and do a few topics in 5 minutes, which for me, not felt natural.
No.
So I'll do like one thing for 5 minutes. But obviously, if the audience isn't on board with that thing at the start,
Well, I think that there is a bit of trial and error, and it's not necessarily. There's no real right or wrong.
No.
And I know that my approach to doing an hour is different from, say, Josh Widdicombe's approach to doing an hour, and Josh will. In fact, a lot of that wheelhouse of comedians, what they do is they write like 12 5-minute sets, and then you can cut it up after you do your hour, and then you can kind of like do 5 minutes on. You've got 5 minutes clean for radio,
right? Yeah.
And do you know what I mean? And you can kind of look at, and I think that's a really clever way of doing it. But I've just never got. I guess the closest I've got to that is I'll write a show with songs in, and then when I do 8 out of 10 cats, I can do one of my songs on 8 out of 10 cats. But in terms of like, and also a song is kind of like my way of doing material. You know, it is material. But it's not necessarily traditional stand-up. And my traditional stand-up, or the thing that's closest to my traditional stand-up, when you take it out of an hour, is so related to that hour. For instance, I did a show about dreams, and a show about war, and a show about being famous, and all this stuff. And so all of the material is so much related to that. It's not like you're going into a club and making casual observations that everyone can just get on board with.
Yeah.
I've written a show that's all about a specific thing, and when you come and watch it, you're all on board. But when you're cutting it up into 5-minute chunks, it kind of doesn't. It falls apart a bit because you need all the other stuff to give it the context. So I don't know. I think that there's something in kind of like trying lots of bits and pieces, but also when you're starting out, you just gather together all your good bits, and then it's like, it doesn't necessarily make sense, but that joke works and that joke works, and then when you get like 100, 200 gigs under your belt, then you kind of like know what you're doing a bit better.
Yeah.
But then I've just taken a year off and I've started gigging again, and you just like, I think my recovery period will be quicker. Like I'll get back into it.
Yeah.
But it's still hard getting started again. You know. So I just think you're never finished learning.
No.
And you're never a finished product, do you know?
Yeah.
Kind of, we're all under construction. Yeah. I think that's Missy Elliott. Yeah.
Because part of me wants to go. Well, I'll book somewhere at a fringe festival. I mean, but then it's you sort of think, well, that's silly because you've only done 15 gigs or whatever. But you kind of go, well, I want to book somewhere at a fringe festival, do half an hour or something, and then I can, even if that half an hour's crap, I've done a half an hour and I can see what it feels like.
I think do whatever you want to do. I'm honest. I think that I know when we started out, there was so much emphasis put on. Don't do an hour yet because then you won't be eligible for Best Newcomer.
Right.
And you go, yeah, great, but there's one person that's going to win Best Newcomer the year that you do your gig, right?
Yeah.
And there's a chance that it's you. So I would stop thinking about things in terms of competitiveness, and I would start thinking about things in terms of yourself.
Yeah.
And I just think that I did. What did I do? I wrote my first Edinburgh show, which wasn't a stand-up show, in 2001, which was like a dark sketch show, and then I did the same 2002, and then I wrote a play, and then so I did that. I used to work in a pub, and then I used to work in when I started getting more gigs at night in the evening. I couldn't work in the pub, so I started working in office. I did like admin jobs, and I'd take all that money and I would put it into Edinburgh. I did theatre at university, but it was not a practical course. It was all mainly theory. And I used to run a theatre and education company, and I'd get tour around schools, and I'd write and direct the shows, and I'd tour around schools and make some money off that. It wasn't very fulfilling. And I guess I was sort of being modest, or I was sort of putting off what I actually wanted to do. Which was, and I didn't know what that was at that point, but I knew that It's really rude because we're doing a podcast in a public space. So
with the creakiest floorboards above us.
So it was, so I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then what happened was one day I just sort of like got to like, not my wit's end, but I got to a point where I was stuck. I did quite well at uni. And then it wasn't like you, when you leave uni you realise, it's actually a lot harder. It's a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
You sort of walk out and you think, I'm going to conquer the world.
Absolutely, and then you realise very quickly that, no one gives a shit. And then it was just, and I found that a bit like crushing, I suppose. And so I made a list of all the things that I maybe one day wanted to do. You know, if I was a 6-year-old, you know, I tried to kind of like be like, so I'd put stuff like, I want to write a book and I want to be in a band, but I'd also put stuff like, I want to be an astronaut, you know? And then what would happen is I'd go through the list, and I'd go, I can't be an astronaut because I'm not good at science, and I'm 25, so I've left it too late. And then so you cross that off, you go, I could be in a band one day, but that requires organising a load of other people. I've just done theatre, and it's the same sort of thing where you're organising other people to follow your dreams, and it's kind of like, and so I was, and I'll write a book, but that'll take months, right? So it wasn't the laziness, it was just I need to do something now to get me out of the house, and so, and so then one of the things was stand-up comedian, and I've always, grew up watching stand-up, and I love comedy, and it was all that, but I never thought it was a thing, which I think is probably the thing that has changed the most, is that people think that it's a job now.
Yeah.
And back then it was just like I was living at my parents' house in St Albans and I didn't know anyone that did comedy, and it was like I didn't have any connections whatsoever, and there wasn't sort of like a clear line, to get there, and there was no one my age that was doing it, and then so I found like this course and I did it, and then I realised that I liked doing it, and then you go, oh right, but I'd already done several hours in Edinburgh before not a stand-up, it was theatre and dark comedy and stuff like that. But and I wrote a musical, but when I started doing stand-up, that was the point where you go, it's like all of the skills that I've learned doing all this other stuff, like including going into schools and talking to strangers for the first time. It's like I used to do a show about road safety to 500 15-year-olds. Right? 15-year-old boys at a boys' school that all hated me. And you go, do you know what?
Having watched your stand-up, I can't imagine you.
If you go in and do that and you can survive that, then you go, fucking 15 apathetic audience members on a Sunday night is easy. And also it's what I want to do. And I don't mind all of that. It's all that thing. It's better to be at the bottom of a ladder that you want to climb than halfway up one that you're not interested in. And so it's just like that. And so, so in terms of kind of like walking before you can run, sometimes that's great. But I think there's a lot of emphasis put on delaying the inevitable, which is that you're going to do an hour at some point. And you might as well just jump in and enjoy it. If that's what you want to do, just do it. Yeah. And I think there's too much pressure put on awards and all of that stuff, because it's just kind of like, it doesn't matter. And you know what, so in 2009 I did my first sort of hour, but it was me doing about 45 to 50 minutes with a guest, and I'd have a guest every day, like Joel Dommett would come in, or Sarah Pascoe would come in, and they'd come on and they'd do like, I think the idea was that they'd bring in a mug and they'd talk about their favourite mug, and then they'd do their party piece, and then maybe we'd sing a song together. And
didn't Joel Dommett have like a really weird one?
It was disgusting.
I remember you talking about this on Comedian's Comedian.
It was disgusting. He lactated.
Oh yeah.
But no one is under the assumption that it was milk.
Right.
It's just sort of this. It's either a sweat gland or it was pus or it was something. It was something clear that oozed out of his nipple, and it was absolutely. James Acaster was in the room, and he said it was. He said it's one of the funniest things that he'd seen, because I was so disgusted. He's like the happiest man on the planet. Right. Joel Dommett. Yeah. Lovely boy. Lovely boy. And I'm not. And the contrast of him with his huge grin, squeezing his nipples till liquid came out of it, and me being absolutely horrified by it. It was just, horrible. Horrible. But so he did that. So that didn't. I don't think that quite qualified as me doing an hour. But what happened is at the end of the month I couldn't get someone to do it, so I ended up doing the whole hour. Right?
Yeah.
It's 2009. 2010. I think I technically qualified to get nominated for Best Newcomer, but I didn't. And to be fair to me, it didn't ever occur to me that I would be, or I could be, or anything like that. It never occurred to me that I would be nominated for Best Newcomer at the Foster's Awards, or whatever it was called back then. And it never occurred to me that I would get nominated, and to be fair to the awards panel, I didn't. So it was like, you go, oh. It was only afterwards where people said, oh, wow, because it was a big show. It was like, I started the show at the beginning of the month, and there was like 3 or 4 people that were in the audience, and by like a week in, it was standing room only. Daniel Kitson and Jimmy Carr had all come, and it was and it was literally, it was kind of like, and I wasn't, no one was telling me anything. Yeah. No one was coming up to me going, wow, your show's really good. People would just sort of like come up and say, there's a lot of buzz about your show, and you'd go, is there? Because no one's telling me about this.
Yeah.
And it was like
how did it go from 3 or 4 people to
literally it doubled every day until
just people, word of mouth, people said, oh, this is good.
Until mid-month. It was sort of like, it was, and I did a thing. I said, what did I do? I did a thing where on the first day, I mean, the show was always designed that when we were previewing it, that I'd get someone out of the audience at the beginning, and I'd sing a song with them. I'd sing like "Nice to meet you, nice to greet you." This was my song, and I'd sing that with them, and we'd slap our legs, and then I'd sit them down, and it was just like this weird little thing. And then on the first day in Edinburgh, there was 7 people in the room, or something like that. It was like a low number, single figures. And I think my agent was in the room, and I just got everyone up on stage.
Right.
And then the next day there was like 10 people in the audience, and I got them all up on stage. And then the next day there was 20 people, and then I got them all up on stage. And eventually it was like, I think it was like a 75 seater. So it was downstairs at the Tron. So it's quite a small thing. And by the end of it, but I think my friend Rob, who was playing guitar for me that year, and it was sold out. Like people just like standing up like by the bar and looking around pillars and stuff because there was no room. And Rob said, "Well, what are you going to do today?" And I said, "Well, I'll just get them all up on stage." So we got them all, and then people were coming up to me in the street going, I haven't thought about this in years, by the way, but people were coming up to me in the street and they were going, "Oh, apparently you're getting everyone up on stage now." And you go, "Oh yeah." And then that became like a talking point. I think there was like stuff in the show that was like, "Oh, you've got a," and that wasn't nominated. And I think that was the year that I would have been eligible to have got Best Newcomer.
Right.
And then the next year was 2011, and I did a show called Dare to Dream, which again was something else in London. And then as soon as I went up to Edinburgh, it changed completely. And then that did get nominated, and that got nominated for the main award. And then I got nominated one more time after that, and that's all sort of taken care of itself. I think my best show was This Means War in 2012, which didn't get nominated. And there's no real rhyme or reason to it,
Yeah.
I've never won, but that's never really been my goal. And there was always a lot of, there's always a lot of people saying, "Oh, well, if you do your hour this year, you won't be able to get nominated." The chance of you getting nominated is so small, you might as well just do it.
Yeah.
Because by the time you've done your first hour, you'll be good enough to do your second hour. And by the time you do your second hour, it's not like they get progressively easier. They're all very different. I think, mechanically, all of the shows start off with like an idea or something. But like once a show started, because I had the costume in my wardrobe and I was just like, I need to come up with a show. I wasn't going to do a show that year. And then I had like a month to put the show together. It was just like, right, okay, so I've got an Evel Knievel costume, so I wrote the show about the costume. And then, once it comes from like, I was in a theme park here when I saw someone wearing a Led Zeppelin t-shirt, and I was just like, oh, I'll base the poster on that, and it'll be called this. It was called Dare to Dream. And you go, right, and that sort of came together with visual things, and then I wrote the show from that. So everything comes a different way, and it never gets easier, but they all have their own different challenges, and they all start off, for me, in different places, and I think you just need to embrace all that. just I have my little phrases. I always say, if you're always looking over the fence to see what everyone else's garden is up to, then your own lawn overgrows. Right? And I just think that it's such a competitive thing. And, and what I loved most about starting out was all the friends that I made and all the camaraderie that we had. And we'd do gigs and we felt like, oh God, that was a terrible gig. We survived it, you know. And the thing that I like least about the industry is the competitiveness, and so I just try and not focus on that and focus on my own stuff and let other people worry about that, because the idea is that you end up being so good that no one can compete with you anyway, or you're so different or so unique. Do you know what I mean? If you're worried about the fact that you might have a similar joke to someone else, cut it. Write another joke. You know, it's not up for grabs. Do you know what I mean? It's just kind of like if you're worried that you've got someone else's joke or they've got your joke, you just get rid of it, because you don't want to be doing stuff that's similar to someone else anyway. Now, that might have been my own wisdom, or it might be the fact that I read that Steve Martin book 10 years ago, and that might be coming out. But I think there's truth to it, and I think you just need to. Everyone needs to be a lot kinder to themselves. The thing that you've got to always keep hold of is that you've got to always be open to learning, and failure is not a failure. You know, if you have a bad gig or a tough gig, or people don't laugh at your jokes or whatever, do you know what I mean? If you struggle, you're learning more from those gigs. You always listen to your audience and find out what they find funny and where they're laughing, but then don't give them kind of like ultimate control, because I did loads of previews in London that never worked, and they only ever worked as soon as I got up to Edinburgh. Right. I did in 2011, before I got nominated. I think one of my last previews was in London. 70 people were in the audience and 57 of them walked out. A week before I went up to Edinburgh. 57. I said, before I went in, I said to the guy that ran the gig, I said, how many people are in? Right. He says, we've sold 70 tickets, right? At the end, one of the groups was a hen do, right? And they hadn't sold tickets, it was a free gig, and it was like, it's a hen do. Yeah, that's not... You've bought your hen to a free comedy gig where I'm doing an Edinburgh preview. You're the worst. That's lazy. You're lazy, right? I'm sure she's not grateful. None of you are enjoying it. It's your own fucking fault. You haven't paid. You know? So they all left. And then I did a head count at the end, and there was 13 people left. One of them was my girlfriend, and one of them was a director I was thinking about working with, but we never worked with each other in the end. Is that because they saw 57 people leave? No. Although, I mean, I'm proud of that story. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, it's a good story. A week later, I was doing, I had a sold-out show in Edinburgh, and I got nominated for the big comedy award. And you go, well, there's no rhyme or reason to that. I can't beat myself up about it. So you just like go do this. It's a crazy adventure. So you've got to take it all with a pinch of salt, I think. So. Well, I think the first few gigs I did went like surprisingly well. Like people were laughing at my jokes, and I was like, oh, this is all right. Yeah. And then and there was always like these two jokes at the start that seemed to work, and then I did one gig and they didn't work, and I was always afraid of people not laughing, as probably everyone is at the start. But instead it was more like, oh, this is interesting. Sure. They're not okay, and then you sort of know that you have to either work at it or take a slightly different approach or to get them. Yeah, I think the majority of people who don't do comedy assume that not getting a laugh is the worst thing that will ever happen to you. Yeah. They just think, oh my God, that's so awful. And you go, no. Yeah. I used to work in admin. That was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I used to do what you do.
Yeah.
So this is fine. You're not laughing at my joke. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
But obviously you do care a lot, but and every single time it hurts. But you put it into perspective. So yeah, but also my first gig was so good. Like I absolutely smashed the
That's how I felt.
And then for the next 6 months, I died on my ass, and it was just like you go, oh, and and you still have times where you have good gigs and bad gigs. It'll never change. That's always how it works. Sometimes it'll be an audience, people that are up for. It's not just whether they like comedy or not. It's like whether they like you or not.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have your audience, and sometimes you don't have your audience. That's the nice thing about Edinburgh is it's your hour.
Yeah.
You're not sharing an hour with someone else, so it's not like they went, oh, I like the first guy, but not the middle guy.
Yeah.
And actually, what happened in 2010 when I had my really good year, my breakthrough year, was I would do my show at 4 o'clock at the Tron. I don't know if you know Edinburgh. Do you know Edinburgh?
Yeah.
So I did my show at 4 o'clock at the Tron, and then I'd go down to the Caves, and I would do Just the Tonic, Big Value.
Right.
At 7. So I'd finish at 5, I'd have to wait 2 hours, and then I'd do Big Value. And I died every single night on Big Value. I was on in the middle, I think. And so I would have like this incredible gig that was my gig. It was my 1 hour. I'd wait 2 hours and go on at 7:30, and I would die on my arse every night, and that happened for the entire month. And I don't know if there'd have been the other way around, it would have affected what I took. If I died on my arse first and then I had a really good gig. But I'd always have a really good gig that was almost like a religious experience, right? And then I would wait for 2 hours, and then I would die on my arse every day. And it really grounded me. Where you go, fucking hell. And it teaches you a lot about audience, where you're just like, there's no rhyme or reason to it. Yeah. They like me, they think I'm an amazing comedian, and they think I'm the worst comedian they've ever seen. And you go, I don't. And sometimes you get that reaction within the same gig, where you've got half the audience that love you and half the audience that think you're terrible. But you just need to. I don't know. I just think it's on a social level. It's an interesting experience doing it.
Because I always used to think when comedians would die and then say, oh, it wasn't my audience, or I always used to think, well,
that's losers talk.
Yeah, I always used to think like, well, maybe you just weren't funny. But actually,
now that you know what it's like to die on your ass,
whether it's just me, doing the same thing myself.
Yeah.
But I think because not to make this podcast about me at all, but it's my podcast.
Go for it.
But because I'm doing sort of slightly odd character stuff, I think sometimes people just aren't looking for that. You know what I mean? Sometimes people just want the observational stuff, or sometimes, and so I feel like sometimes if you go into it and they just sort of don't get the premise, I guess, then
you get some people who go, oh wow, isn't it amazing how he's deconstructing stand-up comedy and he's blurring the line between what it is to be a performer and an audience member, and you get some people going, why is he shouting? Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of like you can be both of those things in the same room. And sometimes people, I wrote in 2013. I wrote a show called One Man Megamyth, which was a really complicated show. There was kind of a lot of layers, and if you took any material out or any song out, the show wouldn't kind of work, right? And it all was kind of like layered, like a play, because I used to write theatre, right? And it was layered, like there was everything tied together and themes and stuff like that, and it was telling a story. And but the thing that I learned that year was that people aren't going to stand up to analyse it. They find it funny and they don't find it funny, but they're not looking at it at that other level.
Yeah.
And if people do get it on that level, that's a bonus.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't rely on that level. It should, at the end of the day, try and be funny. And I think that I got to a point in Edinburgh where I found my audience, and they came back to see me every year, and I loved that relationship. Whereas once you've had that, and you have to go back into clubs and you do 20s and people are like, oh, we like the first act. Then you just kind of like go, I don't need to be here.
Yeah.
And some comedians swear by winning over a crowd, and some comedians just keep gigging to their own crowd until it's bigger than everyone else's, you know.
Yeah.
It's bigger than the majority. So I don't know. I'm not saying that there's a right or way thing for you to do it, but I know that through trial and error, I've tried to work out the best way it is for me to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's also what's nice about this industry, is there isn't like a direct ladder. And also what's great about starting out and before anyone gives a shit about you, is that you can try something different every night of the week.
Yeah.
Right? As soon as I tried, you know, I was really upbeat, I was really energetic, I was really happy, I was really this and this and this and this, and then eventually I was just like, I was doing a gig in Edinburgh with Angelos, and it was like 10 comedians, and it was raining, and it was in the middle of the day, and there were a lot of people in the audience, and one after the other, all of us acts went on stage and died on our asses. No one laughed at all for the entire thing, and by the time I went on, I was just like, why are you here? Like, why are you here? Because nobody wants to be here. None of the acts want to come on stage for you because you're not laughing at anyone, right? You're miserable, right? And you don't want to be here because you haven't laughed for the entire hour. So why don't we just all cut our losses? You fuck off, we fuck off, and we can all just get something out of this, right?
Yeah.
We could spend an hour in the pub. We don't have to be here. And the acts really laughed at that.
Yeah.
And then that was kind of like the beginning of me going, I don't have to be nice. I don't have to get the audience to like me. I can just go on and say.
What did the audience do? They sort of look at you? Or did you get some laughs from them?
No, I think they reacted to me the same way they reacted to everyone else. But the one thing is that I enjoyed it.
Right.
Because it was an awful gig, and you go, because no one's getting anything out of this. I could do my material that I've written that I care about, and no one can laugh at it, and I'll think, oh, they didn't like my kids. Do you know what I mean? Or I can just go, no, I'm not. You're not even worth my jokes today. I'm angry with you because you're making us go through with all of this. And I think, and then that's but when you hit upon the thing that people like, you go, oh, right, so I had my 20 where it was kind of like this nervous breakdown in 20 minutes. And then I did my hour where it's kind of like this, I'm very angry and I'm on stage and there's all this other stuff. And I talk about like, there's all the mental health issues and masculinity and all this other stuff that's in the shows, but it's like this roller coaster ride. When you do that, then that's what your job is now.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to sort of like go, oh, this year I'm going to do sketch comedy. Or this year I've worked on a character who's a little bit like Mr. Bean. Do you know what I mean? You can't do that when they know you for a thing.
Yeah.
It's like Jimmy Carr can't come out and do kind of like Chekhov. He's got to do, well, obviously because it's theatre as well, but do you know what I mean? He's got to,
he's got to do one-liners.
He does his one-liners, and that's what people come to year in, year out to see him do. It's the same thing, you know?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, and so you'll get to a point where people go, oh, well, we didn't like this show as much because he didn't reinvent the wheel again. But then you go, that's not my job. It's hard enough to find your own voice in this market.
Yeah.
So when you found it, it's yours. You should protect that. And I just think that's one of the things that I've learned from it. And we were saying just before we started recording that I think that in retrospect, I may have thought of having a stage name. So that I could compartmentalise it all, because it may be easier for me to write for that character over there. I don't think it's a character, I think it's a persona, but it would be maybe easier for me to write for a separate entity rather than to be kind of like to blur how I feel about stuff, and it'd be easy for the audience to tell the difference.
Right.
But I think, so I could go like, well, I feel this and I'm like this, and but that character's like this, and he thinks that, And I think.
Why does that bother you?
I don't think it bothers me, but what I think people have difficulty. The amount of interviews that I've done where people say, "Oh, he's very different in real life," and you go, "Well, yes."
Yeah.
But you're a comedy critic as well, the person that I'm talking to, and you go, don't you know the difference between performing and not performing? It's like, you know, so I just think that if it had been like this thing, you wouldn't have to spend every day, you know, saying, yeah, that's an act, and that's, you know, the act is about stuff I care about, and the act is, like, from my point of view, I write about things that genuinely, you know, that genuinely concern me, and I think about, and I write about my emotions and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But you put it on stage for an hour, and then you perform a show. You write a thing in January, and you're performing it in August.
Yeah.
And so you're
in a different place.
Yeah,
there
you're recreating a thing. It's
Yeah.
a performance. I think that it's a compliment, I suppose, because, you know, there's part of it that's like going, don't they know it's an act? And then the other part of it's just like, they don't know it's an act.
Yeah.
It's, you know, and I think that's, my agent said when she first started getting into comedy, that she went to see Jeopardy, and she thought it was the funniest thing. She couldn't believe that he'd got up on stage and he was just saying all that stuff off the top of his head, and he was the best thing that she'd ever seen. And then she came back and saw him the next day, and he did exactly the same thing. And I was just like, well, weren't you disappointed that you realised it was all material? And she goes, no, I thought it was amazing, because he went on and did the same thing every night, and he made it look like it was the first time he'd say it. And you go, that is the difference. I know when you first start going to see comedy and you see the same act again, and you go, oh, I was a bit disappointed, he did all the same stuff. But then if you actually appreciate it for a performance, you go, fucking hell, they made it look like they'd just thought of it. Yeah. That's incredible.
Because my favourite thing to do as well is go to work in progress gigs, but then also to go to like the finished tour afterwards and see where the difference is.
Yeah, I was on after Frank Skinner once, when like literally I'd done 10 gigs, and Frank Skinner was downstairs at the King's Head, and he went on and tried out some new stuff. And it didn't, you know, it didn't go great. Huh. And I went on after, and I was just like, oh, absolutely smashed it, brilliant. And then you go, oh, I guess I'm better than Frank Skinner. I've done 10 gigs, so I guess I've learned everything there is to know about comedy. Yeah. And then I saw that routine in the final show. It was at the Birmingham NEC, and it's one of my favourite routines. I just think it's it's incredible, that bit of stand-up. It's the bit when he's getting a text off of, he's texted his girlfriend, and she hasn't replied back, and it goes on a flight of fantasy. And it's just like, I just think it was really, like, it's performed really well, and it's kind of like, it's dark and it's all these things. But that was not apparent in front of the 20 people that were in that room that night. But when he did it in front of 10,000 people, it's incredible. And you go, oh, right. And so that's what I mean about always learning. You think when you start out that, you know, oh, I guess I know it. I thought I heard Russell Brand say that it takes 200 gigs to know what you're doing, but I've done 10. And 3 of them have been absolutely outstanding. So, you know, I think that you have to, I think it's human nature really, but I think you have the tendency of kind of like, chalking up all of your good experiences down to you did it deliberately, and all your bad ones that it's someone else's fault, and it's somewhere in between. You can take credit, you got up there in the first place, but also it might have just been a nice night. You know?
Yeah.
So.
The nervous breakdown thing is something you do quite a lot. Well, it's like a recurring thing in your, because I spent a lot of last night watching your Eat Your Heart Out.
Oh yeah.
Which is great. But that also is you trying to hold, well,
that's my...
the Nick Helm persona trying to hold it together
that's my persona. They were like, do you want to do a food show? And I was not really. We did a pilot, and the pilot didn't really turn out the way I wanted it. It was non-broadcast, and so we did this pilot, and I was just like, yeah, the pilot's fine, but I'm not sure. Anyway, it went away, and I didn't talk. I didn't hear anything about it for about a year. And then about a year later, the producer said, oh, good news, we've got 20 episodes. And I was just like, oh God, 20 episodes of that, oh dear. And I didn't want to do it.
Right.
And then
was it much more of a straightforward, like, I'm just going to go and eat in restaurants with people?
Yeah, it felt a bit laddie, and it wasn't called that. It was, well, what happened was me and my girlfriend split up, and I literally wanted to get out of the house, and they said, do you want to do a pilot for a food show? And I was like, is it televised? They said no. I was like, yep, absolutely, absolutely. I did that. So we went up to Manchester. I can't remember what it was called. It was called, I can't remember what it was called. But it was basically me talking to the camera, and it was quite lad. It was like Top Gear for food.
Right.
And it was like, I'm going to eat lunch, breakfast, dinner, maybe a snack. Today I'm in Manchester, home of the Hacienda.
Right.
And it was kind of like, and then I'd go in and I'd meet the people, and I'd meet the people that owned the restaurant. I went to two places. I think I went to a Caribbean jerk chicken restaurant.
Right.
And I met the people, and they were really nice. And then at the end, I'd eat the food, and then I would come outside and give them a rating out of 10. And I was just like, what's the point of that? I'm a nice person, and there's no point that I'm ever going to give anyone like a 6. Do you know what I mean? I'm never going. I mean, it's always going to be a 10 out of 10. Do you know what I mean? Just like, so there was that. But two things happened in the pilot, which were just like, hang on. The first thing that happened in the pilot was that when I ate the jerk chicken, I got very emotional about it as a joke. And I was just like, this is the nicest food I've ever eaten. And it looked like I was about to burst into tears.
Right.
And then the other thing that happened was when we did the second section, I went around a woman's house and she makes ice cream. And so we were making ice cream together. And what happened was I hate eggs. And we had to separate the whites from the yolks by hand in order to make the ice cream.
Yeah.
And it hit my gag reflex, and I kept almost being sick in the kitchen. And then the other thing was, we got halfway through the meeting, and my face was on fire, and my eyes were streaming. And I was just like, do you have cats? And she was like, yeah. And I'm allergic to cats. And so we were filming this thing where I suddenly just get into this sneezing fit, and my hands are covered in raw egg, and I'm gagging because I feel like I'm going to be sick, and I'm sneezing at this cat, and it was just like it was like Curb Your Enthusiasm or something, where it was like a series of accidents that turned into this thing, and it was ridiculous. And when we finished the show, I was just like, if we could do that for a series, I think that'd be great. None of that was planned, but if we could do that sort of thing, that's what I mean. I'm interested in that. I'm interested in doing a comedy show that has food in it. And then I saw High Fidelity, the film, the John Cusack film, and I was just like, and also if you took in an element of me and my girlfriend to split up, and now I'm going to take you through all the restaurants that we used to hang out when we were together. So that was like those two things was just like the happy accidents from the pilot and that. And then it was like, can we do it like that? And they were like, sure. And that was that. But then also, I guess I do that thing about having a break. But that, like I said before, that's my thing. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of like, that's what I do. And you could sort of like subvert my act by kind of like, I'm really in a good mood today. And I think when I did Heavy Entertainment, we had episodes like that. Yeah. We had an episode where I was in love, and we had an episode where it was all good. And the whole series basically had kind of like, the series had that sort of structure, but the episode by episode, they would kind of like be quite different from each other. Yeah. But it's just a way of kind of like, it's just a way of sort of like putting what you do into a format, I suppose. Yeah. Whereas it's not so much like if it was something like Jimmy Carr presenting 8 out of 10 cats, you don't expect for him to go on an emotional journey. Yeah. That's not what he does, But what I do is that's what I do. Yeah. And so. So I suppose it's sort of it's a different act to that, and so it's quite sometimes it's not really about writing writing the jokes, but it's about finding the jokes are sort of like a vehicle for the act.
Yeah.
You could actually be talking about anything, because what the actual act is about is what's just happened to me before I went on stage.
Yeah, and you're trying to hold it together.
And I'm holding it together while I'm on stage.
Yeah.
As opposed to, hey, I've got this really great bit about Brexit. It's kind of like, I might have a bit about Brexit, but I've made it entirely all about the fact that my girlfriend's left.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like the angle, I suppose.
I was listening to, or sort of re-listening to, the Richard Herring
Of Leicester Square podcast.
that you were on.
And he finger fucked me.
Yeah. In the Bellybutton.
Yeah.
But that sent me down a rabbit hole of Bellybutton fluff research.
Oh yeah.
Because and then I had a conversation with my girlfriend last night. I was like, do I talk to him about Bellybutton fluff? Is that a bit weird when you first meet? But no,
It's fine.
I'm going to do it because I spent an hour on it.
Hello.
I spent an hour on it last night.
On what?
On Bellybutton fluff. So I can't.
We can't waste that time.
I can't waste that time.
What do you want to know?
Well, no, it's just because you said you get a lot of Bellybutton fluff.
What on show and tell?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
when I was on stage, yeah. I do actually get a lot of belly button fluff. I've got quite a cavernous belly button.
I have a similar problem.
Oh, really?
with the.
Do you get belly button fluff?
Yeah, like a lot, and I don't know. I didn't know where it comes from.
I don't know where it comes from.
So this is what
I think. But you saw the little routine.
Yeah.
Where it's like, the hair. I think what happens is the hair on your body rubs on your clothes, and it all sort of like gravitates towards your belly button, and that's where it collects.
Yeah, so I found an article.
Oh right,
So I thought
Is that basically what happens?
Basically, there was this guy who spent 3 years researching it, called George Steinhauser.
Oh God, of course, George.
Who's a
Steinhauser.
chemist, as you know. He's a doctor. He made his discovery after studying 503 pieces of fluff from his own belly button.
Right. And what was the discovery?
Spent 3 years doing it. He's basically discovered that there's a different type of body hair that only some people have, that, well, like some people have more of compared to others, that traps the stray pieces of lint from your clothes and draws them into your belly button.
But that's crazy, right?
I know.
It's like the hair on your body is its own living organism that is feeding off the lint off your clothes and popping it into your belly button to what? Feed it? It's like,
I don't know. He says, he doesn't actually say why it happens. It just happens.
if it was a fish in the ocean that was,
Right.
do you know what I mean? That this sort of occurrence was happening to.
Yeah.
You would study it and you go, isn't it weird that, that specific species of fish have this thing occurring to them? If people were like studying us, they'd go, isn't it weird that there's a certain subspecies of human that gets belly button fluff?
And
but it's crazy.
But it is mad.
It does happen to people, right? But I just think because it's an everyday occurrence to a lot of people just are sort of like, But just stop and think about it. It's absolutely mental.
So apparently there's little like barbed hooks on the hairs.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
That like must like take it away. He also asked his friends, family, workmates about their own belly button.
Yeah.
So he's gone down the rabbit hole of really. So apparently, I mean, that seems like an obvious statement to make. He said Dr. Steinhauser established that shaving one's belly will result in a fluff-free navel, but only until the hair grows back. That's kind of an obvious thing to say, isn't it, really?
Yes.
I could have told you. I didn't need to do 3 years of research.
No. I mean,
but there are
paid the bills,
but
I'm sure.
This is what I thought was mental. Your new clothes. So apparently it happens more with new clothes than old clothes, which I didn't know that.
I would imagine, because if you think about it, you haven't worn them loads and washed them loads.
That's true.
And there would be more. Do you know what I mean? Let's just say even if you never washed your t-shirt, and you wore it for a year,
Yeah.
there would be more to collect off of it at
Right.
first than there would be later.
That's, yeah.
Like a supermarket during a national crisis. Right? There's more at the beginning than at the end.
But apparently, clothes can lose up to 1,000th of their weight
I don't doubt it.
from getting into your belly button.
I've got t-shirts that are older than you, and there's very little left of them.
So yeah, I just thought
No, that is
because I'd spent.
you spent an hour. Well,
Yeah,
no,
spent
do you know
an
what?
hour.
I and it's one of those things that I always mean to look up. But when did I do that clip? I did that clip in 2009, maybe 2010.
I thought there was a risk that you may have looked it up since.
No, I haven't got around to it in 10 years.
But clearly, you don't have as much free time on your hands as I do. To
I don't know about that.
To devote. To
I am a
looking
professional comedian. There are a lot of empty days.
Graham Barker
Yeah,
holds the Guinness World Record.
yeah. Of what? The most belly button fluff?
Yeah, biggest collection. Because he's been collecting it in jars every day since 1984.
I always mean to collect it as well, but...
Why? What would you do with that?
Well, I just think it's... I don't know, but it's just one of those things where you go... I could get a free t-shirt, do you know what I mean? So the routine, the routine is me looming it, right? Like it's wool.
Right.
And then I loom it, and out of the loom thread that I make from all this woolly belly button fluff, I make another t-shirt or I make a jumper, and then I wear that, and when I wear it, all of my belly button collects a tiny little t-shirt, right? So it's like, do you know what I mean? So it's just like, hang on, well, if you wear a t-shirt and then you get fluff in your belly button, then what happens if you wear fluff? You might get a t-shirt in your belly button. That was the joke, right? It was a bit of a stretch, right? I used to do lots of really surreal stuff, but yeah, it's. I've never really thought about it to the extent where I've got scientists involved. It is so weird. But I don't know why I would personally collect it.
No, I'm still waiting for...
Aren't you curious? I mean, if you get it, why don't you think that one day, if you get enough, you could make some new clothing out of it?
Well, I hadn't thought about it until
For
now.
every 100 t-shirts you buy, you could make a free t-shirt.
Yeah.
I reckon it's less than.
That's a thought.
I reckon it's less than 100. 20. With every 20 t-shirts, you could make a free t-shirt. Imagine that, though. Come on, imagine.
I'm imagining. I don't know.
People go, "That's a nice jumper. Where'd you get that from?" I made it. What sort of wool is that?
But I don't know if I'm good enough.
You don't want to know.
I don't know if I'm good enough. I'd have to learn how to make garments first.
Same as comedy, you've got to start at the bottom and work your way up.
That's true. My friend does do fashion though, so he could make it.
Yeah.
So all I need to do is convince him that he should make clothes out of my belly button fluff.
Just learn it yourself. Stop being so lazy. Don't get your friend
Yeah, but I'm
involved.
already doing the collecting. I'm already doing the work by creating the fluff.
But the creating the fluff is a byproduct, isn't it? And
Well,
collecting it is something that you do when you're watching telly at night. There you go, bloody hell. Love, look at that. Fucking hell. Oh, God. It is weird, but it's... I think that it would be possible to actually, make something
Make
out
a
of
garment.
it.
Well, it's food for thought, I guess.
Don't eat with it. don't eat around it.
So there you have it, Nick Helm. My thanks to Nick for taking part in the show, and my thanks to you, the listener, for joining me this week. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to share it around with your friends, your family, the people you like, the people you don't like. I don't really care if you like them or not. Just send them the podcast. And don't forget to join me on all the various social handles I talked about earlier. And if you're feeling, extra generous, then chucking us some money at patreon.com/thelastline would always be appreciated. Until next time, have fun in the sun, if it continues, wherever you are. I'm James Albarn, and this is The Last Line.